For this evening's talk, feel free to come closer to the front. If you're sitting in a chair, I might ask you to make sure you're not blocking folks' view as much as possible. Thank you very much for being here. Again, please sit comfortably. If you'd like to shuffle and move a little closer, you're welcome to. If you're smart enough to stay out of the line of fire, I respect you. Just before we get into the main case, how interesting to feel the air is unbreathable. At the moment of this talk, we are in the midst of a bunch of smoke from the wildfires of Canada. And, it occurs to me that typically our little area of the Shire kind of evades most serious weather things. We're not typhoon ridden. We don't typically have tons of tornadoes or earthquakes or this kind of thing. But here we are. With a very clear presentation of how interdependent all of us are on this one pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan put it. And it's just so, it's so easy to feel because we live in relative removal from the most obvious consequences. I fear not for long, but we do. But it's easy to sort of not notice, and it's also easy to think that, the news of these catastrophes are far away, but honestly, they're not. They're really not. I mean, if you could just walk far enough and if you could just go that far that way, suddenly you'd be in the war zone, something like this. It's really not remote. It's really not distant. So what to do? There are some things we can do very little, if nothing, about. There are some things we can influence, and there's some things we can have a little more than a little influence. And it's important that we know how to wield that well. And one of the things that the Buddha Dharma continually brings up for us is to recognize the fact that we live in this world together, all of us. It doesn't have anything to do with being a formal practicing Zen Buddhist or not. All of us are on this globe together. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just realize that and live that way? If humanity just got that much, that would solve 80%. And it's embarrassingly not that hard. Sometimes I consider our species to still be, hopefully, in the very early stages of primitive development. We'll see. The main case today, I'd like to pick up with the Blue Cliff record and continue on. Last time I was here for a Wednesday night, I took case 63, the famous encounter with Nansen, the argumentative disciples, and the unfortunate cat. There's a second chunk of that I'd like to bring up today. Maybe as a refresher, I can go over case 63 very, very quickly. The main case. Nansen, at Nansen's temple one day, the residents of the East and the West halls were fighting over a cat. Seeing this, Master Nansen picked it up and said, "If you can speak truly, I won't kill this cat." No one could respond, and so Nansen cut the cat in two. Problematic case in some ways, and yet an important teaching is embedded here. When we think about why are they arguing over the cat, if you've been hanging around Zen for a while, you might say, oh, does a cat have Buddha nature? And yes and no, and I maybe, I don't think so. Who knows? Maybe, should we really be having this cat in the temple? After all, this cat kills mice. Are we supporting the execution of mice then? Is this a bad thing? Do we have mouse blood on our hands? No, we need that. It keeps the rice safe. Yes, but we're supposed to not kill. Well, but it's the natural way of a cat to be alive. This is how they function. Yeah, but we're really, something like this maybe is going on. Some kind of minutia of moral imperative or something like this. We don't know. We don't have any context. But what we do know is that Master Nansen's ire rose. He was not happy with, I wouldn't even say the discussion, but the quality of the mind that the students were displaying, probably. He found it to be utterly unacceptable. And this is one of the jobs of a Zen master when you've got real students to actually be able to intervene and hold up a mirror and help the pollutants be seen for what they are so that we can clean up a bit. So that's what Master Nansen did. He inserted himself into the situation. He grabbed the cat and said, if you can say an authentic word, I won't kill this cat. And right away, whatever their speculative fury was about, all the oxygen was gone from that conversation, and yet no one could respond. Now, the next case 64 from the Blue Cliff. It's called Straw Sandals. Later that day, Nansen recounted the preceding story to Joshu. Master Joshu immediately took off his straw sandals and put them on his head and left. Nansen then said, if only you had been there, you could have saved the cat. Strange. But not so strange once you unpack. Take it for what it is. We've got to translate through centuries and cultures and languages, right? So this business of putting the shoe on the head, putting the sandal on the head, you can maybe if you don't know any better, you might think, oh, just be completely random and spontaneous. That's it. Just a spontaneous, random non sequitur. That's the Dharma. But no, that's not. Actually, it turns out that if you do just a little bit of digging, and Aitken Roshi in his commentary just says it, in that culture and that day, for whatever reason, hearing upon the death of a loved one, the appropriate social response was to remove your sandal and put it on your head. That's what you do. So, so it's not a random, bizarre act, as it would clearly seem to us. I doubt any of you have had your shoe on your head anytime recently. Who knows? But in this culture in that time, that was kind of like the thing, that was the respectful gesture to make. I remember one sad moment in my own life when I was living in Boston. This was decades and decades ago. And I was with my Aikido teacher, Gleason Sensei, and we were hanging out, having a few, talking philosophy and Aikido and whatever. And the phone rang, and Sensei got it, and he got his entire demeanor changed instantly. And he choked out a few words, "Thank you for telling me." Call ended as abruptly as it had began, and he just walked right over to the altar in the apartment, and I instinctively knew something happened, so I followed him as his jisha, and he lit the candle, took incense, put it to his forehead, offered it, made a bow, and we rang the bell. At that moment, I had no idea what had happened. But it turned out that a good friend, a student, fell to an untimely death. And that was the news that came. So you could say that immediate response, right? The pure, direct, clear response that Sensei made at that time, that I can still feel. Perhaps you can feel it now too. That pure expression of grief. And of course, after the incense was lit and the bell was rung and we made our bows and we sat in silence for a moment, and then Sensei choked through trying to explain, and then we grieved and were pissed in all the stages. As long as I'm talking about it, the Aikido dojo I founded used the shrine pieces from Larry's dojo because once he had passed away, there was no need for them anymore. And Sensei bequeathed them to me, and now they are in Perrysburg. So these things have a life of their own. Anyway, back to our koan. Nansen related the story to Joshu, and immediately Joshu took his straw sandals, put them on his head, made a gasho, and left. Make a little more sense now? Okay. Now, Master said, if you had been there, the cat's life would have been saved. Now let's go back and contrast. The earlier monks, what were they doing? They were not involved in some pure, spontaneous expression of the moment. They were arguing over a cat. How do you even do that? I don't know. But there they were, arguing and bickering to such a level that the master felt he actually had to intervene in this. So something was brewing, right? And then when he presented them, they had no way of responding appropriately. So I think one of the things that's hidden, perhaps, or blatant, depending how you see these things in these koans, is really about the fact that your Zen training should enable you and empower you to intimately meet your own life impeccably, regardless of the circumstance. It doesn't have to do with putting your shoe on your head. In our culture, that's not normative. Give it a try, see if it works for you. But it's not about that, right? But it is about being able to actually meet the circumstances of your life cleanly, clearly, directly, intimately, powerfully, you see. And that's why Master Nansen, after he shared the story with Joshu, and Joshu responded appropriately, that appropriate response is what opened the gate. That's what that's all the Master's looking for. You could say an authentic response, an appropriate response. You know, sometimes we experience ourselves to be victims. So-and-so said such and such. And why not only did they say such and such, then they did this and that. Can you believe it? And after having said such and such and done this and that, why, my head's spinning over this. And it can be very trite things, not big, heavy things at all. Very, very mundane things. A glance returned poorly, a misspelling somewhere, a parking dispute about who got there first. Stupid things, right? But the way that that's thought of is that, you're helplessly having your head turned by the events, as though this ill-informed driver on the highway could literally reach in and grab your head and turn it. And you had no choice. There was nothing you can do. Your head's all turned around by this driver. But actually, with a little bit of reflection, we realize that clearly this is not so. Who is it that's turning your head around after all? It's you. You, baby. You're the one doing it. You're the one sitting there turning your head around and around and around, ruminating, kvetching, rehearsing. And it doesn't have to just be negative things, by the way. Pleasurable things will do it just as well, perhaps better, depending how you're wired. That gleaming new guitar. Woo, woo, woo. And then you drop it. Oh, woo, woo, right? So I think there was a lot of heads turning around this cat issue, whatever it was. And that's what's not acceptable. Why? Because your life is burning down. Day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. None of us will leave the temple grounds younger than how old we were when we arrived this day. That's not how it works. Knowing this, clearly realizing, why do you turn your head around like that? That shit hurts. And it doesn't help. Does it? I mean, no. Now, grief is fine. Please notice. I'm not advocating a non-feeling Vulcan repression of all emotions. That's not what's being talked about here. What did Master Joshu do? He grieved. He made the appropriate expression of grief upon hearing of the death of the cat, right? He didn't just say, "Fascinating, Captain." That's not what happened. He felt sad for the little kitty. So we need to be clear about this. You need to be adult about it. You need to be mature and grow up, right? What's the difference between spinning your head over something and authentically having feelings? Because there is a difference. That's the difference between heaven and hell. And you create it, and you experience it. So we must learn to really take mastery of our minute-by-minute experience. And sometimes people come into Zen training fishing for massive enlightenment experiences, or how to use the force, or to levitate, or all kinds of things. Astral projection was brought to my attention recently. All manner of whatevers. And I tell you, it comes down to really, really ordinary, everyday stuff, because that's what our lives actually are. That's what our life really is. It's taking care of the coffee cup. It's about perhaps grieving well, celebrating joyfully and not clinging, living authentically, dying authentically. It's not separate. Can you trust yourself? Can you trust your inherent perfection and wisdom? Or not? And I understand, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's fine for him to say because he's got the stick or whatever, and I've done all these dumbass things. Well, everybody's done dumbass things. If you've done a dumbass thing in your life, would you please make a gush show? There we are. Look around. You're among friends. Okay? Let's just get that out from undercover right away. No kidding. No kidding. It's how we wield and navigate our mind, our heart, and our guts, and our feelings. How do we authentically meet the moment? Now, there's no way that those monks who were presented with the paradox of the cat, right? They were probably trying to guess, what does the Zen master want me to do? What would be a Zen thing for me to do here? Maybe I should, let me quote something about emptiness, that'll do. All kinds of ponderances, and it's the same mind that was arguing. It's the same mind. It's the same mind that was enmeshed in the arguing. Now it's enmeshed in a little different topic sentence, but it's the same mentality. It's the same feeling. And that's why it's not acceptable. I'm reminded of there's a moment in The Lord of the Rings when Gandalf brings the group, and they come to the dwarven door, and they find it, and it says in Elvish, interestingly enough, in Elvish, it says, "Speak, friend, and enter." And Gandalf sits there, the wizard, and he starts trying to find all the sophisticated, exotic, the spells from of yore. He tries to conjure old magic and new, and he tries all the tricksy things he knows. That door is like not having it. Nope. And this is Gandalf, right? This is the great knowing wizard here. All his cleverness, no good. And then, the Hobbit says, well, how do you say friend in Elvish? Speak, friend, and enter. Gandalf says friend in Elvish, which unfortunately I can't do. Can anyone do that here? Please. Belloc. There it is. And then, poof, you, my friend, have a gold star in the Zendo today. So then he simply says, friend, and the door opens, right? It's something like that. Your mind would give you this prism of complications and ramifications and all these things. And at times, look, it's good to know those things. I'm not down on thinking things through. Let's be clear about it. But if you try to live your life so that every contingency is mitigated before you're willing to start, you're doomed. You're just doomed. It's not going to happen. It's not happening like that. Nothing happens like that. Well, rare, few things happen. I can get my coffee the way I like it at last. I know how to make it, right? So there's this very interesting thing about Zen training where you come into a structure, and it is very structured, and it's very ordered and organized, because we need that structure to be able to find our freedom. That's actually how it is. You have to have some kind of structure to be able to train and achieve your mastery. If you tried to play every sport that ever existed once, and every instrument that was ever invented, you tried to play it once, and every person that you might consider having a relationship with, you had one exchange with them. At the end of thousands of hours of effort, you would have no progress. You'd have some interesting stories, probably. Pick one. If you read the first sentence of all the great novels ever written, you don't know anything about the stories. Pick one. Right? Read the damn thing. Pick your, okay, you're going to play the oboe, go for it. Because in accepting some limits, yes, I choose the guitar. I choose this kind of movement pattern in my martial life, whatever it is for you. Now you can dig in. Now you can actually start to encounter, right? Now you can actually achieve and experience things. Real life doesn't have to be like this, but humans are like this, so therefore our real life is like this. And so we agree, we make agreements. We'll come in and we'll sit facing that way, and we'll be, as still as we can be, and we're going to do whatever the practice is that you have to do, and when the bell rings, we're going to move like this, not like that, and all these kinds of things. And I understand that there are sound reasons for people to bristle at that kind of organized structure, but only until they feel the fruits of it. You see, because we all know, once we make our final bow to each other and we invoke the Bodhisattva vows and everybody hangs and then goes home, it's chaos time, right? The world is going to do whatever the world's going to do. But if you've trained, you bring that mind of immediate intimacy into that situation and you can transform it then. Every place becomes the dojo. Every place becomes the temple. When you suddenly hear the news of a cat passing, you'll put your shoe on your head perhaps, or you'll maybe in our culture, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, or whatever it is that's appropriate. But you'll know. You'll know. You'll be able to simply meet the moment one footstep at a time. We've been reading from the teachings of Master Tao Hui. I'll close with a little bit from him on the same exact subject. His letter 32 says, "Thought after enlightenment. When studying worldly things, one relies totally on verbal meanings and mental thoughts." Listen. When studying worldly things, one relies totally on verbal meanings and mental thoughts. But if you use verbal meanings and thoughts to study the Buddha Dharma, you are way off. Didn't the Buddha say, this Dharma is not something that thought and discrimination can understand? And Yung Chia, a Korean master, said, the loss of the wealth of the Dharma and the demise of virtue stem from the mind's discriminating consciousness. Now understand this clearly. It's not saying walk around like a vegetable. it's what Master Joshu did. He intimately and perfectly responded to the circumstance and expressed grief. The other monks, whose names, uncoincidentally, we don't know, they were stuck in thoughts. They were stuck in meanings and thoughts and words and maneuvers and minutiae and argumentation and so on. Now, what's interesting is as your training develops, you can very comfortably actually have a solid argument. No problem. No problem at all. Because it can be an intimate and immediate expression of reason and thought. And you're not stuck by it. It's not like Zen people can never actually engage in a good argument. That's not the case. We have Dharma combat. We're also married, some of us. We have kids, some of us. Right? We have pugs, some of us. Right? Plenty of opportunity. But how do you do it as a master, not as a victim? How do you fill that seat in mastery of yourself as a Buddha, exactly as you are? Not some transformed you with superpowers, but the regular old you as the miraculous power of life itself, expressing right here and right now. What's more super than that? I couldn't say. Sometime, actually, a student asked me if I could have any superpower, what superpower would I have? And I said, I already have all the important ones. And so do you. And the lightsaber would be fun. So, Nansen recounted the preceding story to Master Joshu, and Joshu immediately put his straw sandals on his head and left. Nansen said, if you had been there, you could have saved the cat. May we all learn to immediately and intimately meet the truth of our lives, to save our lives and each other's, and hopefully the planet. May it be so.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Thank you very much, everybody. Are there any announcements?
So the teaching retreat is the week after next. You should all have gotten, members should have gotten an email about that. There's also a sign up on the Facebook group. So you get that, and it's unlike Shishin registration. You can register via a Google form. And you'll get multiple options, like if you want to stay for meals, so please check all the necessary boxes. So it runs Tuesday through Saturday, I believe. All the details are in that email.
I would say too, shameless plug, but people are always asking me if I'm ever playing anywhere, and the answer is always no, except this Friday I actually am. I'm going to be playing some jazz with some friends. Ryokan from the Sangha, Chris from the Sangha, bass and drums, and a good friend Ariel from Bowling Green. There's a little club called Arlen's Good Beer down at Bowling Green, so I'll be playing there Friday from 7 to 10. If you want to see me in my other life and come hang out and listen to some jazz, please consider it.
Thank you.
That means talk.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for story center.
There it is.